Okay, now we're going to take a look at the options for creating a new image and the different type of pixel ratios and things like that that we have available within Photoshop. I'm going to go up to File, New, and now we can take a look at our screen right here. And we can see that we have certain presets for our file, for our project, and we also can name our file at this point if we wanted to. So I can just call this Test Images. And for presets, we can either use the clipboard, which is actually what's going to happen if you use the print screen, or if you're copying an image from another program, you can select clipboard and it'll automatically size up to whatever that is. Right now it's reflecting on a print screen done with 3 monitors, so it's quite large. We also have the default Photoshop size, which is 7 by 5 and inches. But we can go through here, and this is our setup in inches. As you can tell, this is set up in inches, and then we have some actual pixel resolutions. Most of these are lower end monitor sizes, so we can use these for website design. We also have other printing styles, different legal sizes and things like that. Plus we also have video, and this whole bottom half here is all for video presets. We have NTSC video, HDV, and then a few other types of actual film. If you're not familiar with these settings, or you're not going to be working with television or film at all, then you don't really need to worry about these presets. Okay, I'm going to start out with the default Photoshop size. Let's take a look. We have our width set to 7 and 5. We can of course change that to whatever it is we want. But this is reflected on inches. So 7 by 5 inches doesn't really tell you a whole lot until you take a look at the resolution. With the 72 dpi resolution, this actually is going to be a very small image. So let's go ahead and click OK. And this is our 7 by 5 inch image. You can see it's very small at 100%, considering too that this tutorial is being recorded at 1024 by 768, which is a rather small monitor resolution, but it needs to be kind of small for the recording purpose. So this was 72 dpi, and I'm going to go ahead and close that out. And now let's up this to a print resolution dpi. You want to, if you're going to be doing print resolution, you want to start out with at least 300. So we're going to change our resolution to 300, click OK. And now we can see our image is much larger, and this is only at 33%. So we can use our navigator up in the upper right and click these two larger looking sort of pyramids, and just click on those up to 100%, and we can see that we have a much larger image. And why is that? That's because our DPI is reflecting more on our pixels than the actual inches is. So it's still 7 by 5 inches, but the pixels, it's 2100 by 1500. And if I was to go ahead and change this resolution, our DPI down to 72, you would see that our pixel range is 504 to 360. So that really depends on what sort of project you're going to be working on. If you actually need to use inches, otherwise you'll have to get. It's easier to get used to actually using pixel ratios, because then you can actually tell the size of the image. But if you're working for web or anything like that, you don't want to be using inches, and you only really need a resolution of 72 dpi if you're going to be working on the web. If you're going to be using print, you want to start out with at least 300. You don't want to go below 300, otherwise you can get some pretty bad printouts. Most standard printing is done at 300 dpi. Of course, you can go a little bit higher, and to get actual photographic quality, you can use 700 dpi. A couple of the other options we have in here, we can see we have a color mode. We can select bitmap, grayscale, RGB, CYMK, and lab color. And this also depends on what sort of project you're working on. Bitmap is going to be a 1-bit image. In other words, just black and white. Not even grayscale, no in between, but just a black and white image. And these are usually used for placeholders on websites where you're loading a larger image. So then you can kind of put something in there, a 1-bit image saying it's loading, or something like that would work. Grayscale is another setting we have here. If you're going to be working just in black and white, grayscale, then you're going to be wanting to use in this color mode setting, because you don't need all that color data, and it'll keep your file size a little bit lower. Rgb Color is the standard basic mode that we have for working with computer images. And if we're going to be printing, we have the lab color and the CYMK color. And these are displayed on the screen differently because they are different color schemes. And if we go down to the bottom, we can also see that reflected in our color profiling. I'm not going to go too far into this, but pretty much every single imaging device has its own color profile. So your printer has a color profile, your monitor has a color profile, your scanner has a color profile, your digital camera has a color profile, and they're all different. So there's going to be a lot of changes back and forth between what you see on your screen and what's being printed out and what you're taking with the camera or scanning. So it kind of goes back and forth, and I'm just going to stick with our working RGB, which is pretty much the default. And then if you're going to really print for a specific printer, I have a couple printers loaded in here. Those color profiles are adjusted, so I could select the Epson Stylus R200, and then that would show up the color on the monitor. The only problem is the monitor is trying to display another color profile, so it won't always match up. And that's actually a whole process in of itself. But some of the other things we have here is the background contents. We can either set it to white, background color, or transparent. And if we just set it to white and click OK, we can see we create this image with just a white background. And we're going to File, New, and if we select background color, what that's going to do is select this second color we have down here in our toolbar, the one that's behind our other box. That's our background color. So I can click OK, and you'll see it'll create the color black. So we can go ahead and change that ahead of time if we know what we want to have in the background without having to fill it. I could select red, File, New, background color, click OK, and now we have a red image in the background. We have one other setting, which is transparent. We can click OK. By creating a transparent layer, we don't have a locked layer, which you'll see. Once we start working with the layers, you'll see that with a colored background, that the background layer is locked and you can't really edit it. But with transparent, that means you can work with a lot more, and all of your layers that you create will be free floating, and you don't have to worry about a locked background layer. But we'll get into that a little bit more once we actually start going through the certain panels. And there's one last thing that we have in here, and that is our pixel aspect ratio. Once again, if you're not working with television, you don't need to worry about this, because this is strictly for television editing. If you take a look, we have all of our different television standards, and if you know what you're looking for, you know what standard you're working with, then you can actually display your pixel aspect ratio within Photoshop. And for those of you who don't know what a pixel aspect ratio is, it's the size of the pixel. In other words, the distortion of the pixel. With D1, DV, NTSC, which is digital video, pretty much the American standard size, we have our pixel aspect ratio of 0.9, which means it's a little bit squished on the sides, and it's not quite square. Then 0.95, once we get to PAL, it's a little bit larger than a square outward. And this is always for width that we're looking at, because of course the height's always going to be 1. And then the widescreen is 1.2, so a little bit wider. We have anamorphic, and just all of these different types of pixel aspect ratios, which we can view within Photoshop. But if you're just working with standard files, just stick with square pixels, because that's all you're going to need for print and for web design and anything else you're working on. So you can just set up your file, and whatever size you want, you can go ahead and set up a 800 by 600, 72 dpi, click OK, and then we have our file we can start working on.